The research vessel Liberty moved through the darkness of space like a silent whale crossing an endless ocean. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge, watching the stars slide past the view screen as his ship completed another survey sweep of the Kepler 442 system. 14 months had passed since they left Earth, and the routine of deep space exploration had settled over the crew like a comfortable blanket. They mapped planets, took samples, and sent data back home. Nothing exciting, nothing dangerous, just good, honest science work. Jake was 42 years old with gray starting to show at his temples. He had kind eyes that crinkled when he smiled, which was often despite the isolation of deep space. His crew of 38 people had become like family during the long months away from home. They ate together, played cards together, celebrated birthdays together. The Liberty was small enough that everyone knew everyone else's stories. Amy Fletcher, the chief science officer, called out from her station. Her voice carried excitement that made Jake turn around. She was a woman in her mid-30s with red hair, pulled back in a practical ponytail and freckles across her nose. She had joined the mission fresh from winning a prestigious research award, eager to make discoveries that would matter. "Captain, I'm picking up unusual energy signatures from the fourth moon," Amy said, her fingers dancing across her console. "It's not natural. Definitely artificial." Jake felt his heart rate pick up. In 14 months, they had found plenty of interesting rocks and some basic microorganisms, but nothing artificial. Nothing that suggested intelligent life. He moved to stand behind Amy's station, looking at the data scrolling across her screen. Could it be a probe from another Earth mission? He asked, though he already knew the answer. They were too far out for that. "No, sir," Amy replied. "The energy signature doesn't match any human technology." "This is something else." Jake made the decision quickly. "Change course. Let's go take a look." The Liberty altered its trajectory, moving toward the ice-covered moon that orbited a massive gas giant. As they got closer, the sensors picked up more details. Whatever was down there was big, and it was damaged. Amy prepared an away team while Jake informed Earth Command of their discovery, knowing the response would take 11 days to arrive because of the vast distance between them. 6 hours later, Jake stood in the shuttle bay wearing an environmental suit. Amy was with him along with Ben Tyler, the medical officer, and 4 security personnel. Ben was a calm man in his 50s who had served on 3 deep space missions before this one. His steady hands and steadier nerves made him the best doctor Jake had ever worked with. The shuttle descended through the thin atmosphere of the moon, landing near the source of the energy signature. What they found took Jake's breath away. A ship lay half buried in ancient ice, its hull cracked and broken. The design was beautiful even in destruction, with sweeping lines and elegant curves that no human engineer had ever conceived. Sections of the hull were torn open, exposing dark corridors within. "Life signs," Ben reported, checking his scanner. "Faint, but definitely there." Multiple readings. They entered through one of the larger breaches, their helmet lights cutting through the darkness. The interior was freezing, far below what any human could survive without protection. Bodies lay in the corridors, frozen in the positions where they had died. They were tall, these aliens, perhaps 7 feet on average. Their skin was copper-toned, covered in intricate markings that might have been tattoos or natural patterns. They wore clothing that seemed ceremonial, with beads and feathers woven into the fabric. Amy was recording everything, her scientific mind cataloging details even as her heart ached at the tragedy they were witnessing. "This ship has been here for years," she whispered. "These people have been dying slowly." They followed the life signs deeper into the wreck, past more bodies and through corridors where ice crystals grew on the walls. Finally, they found a section where emergency power still functioned. Heat leaked from the sealed doorway. When they opened it, they found the survivors. 47 aliens huddled in a space meant for perhaps 20. They were thin, desperately thin, their eyes sunken and their movements weak. When the door opened and they saw the humans in their environmental suits, several reached for weapons. Others simply stared with the hollow gaze of people who had given up hope long ago. One of them stood, taller than the rest and carrying himself with the bearing of a warrior despite his weakened state. His markings were more elaborate than the others, running down his arms and across his chest in patterns that suggested high rank or great deeds. He spoke in a language that sounded like wind through canyon rocks, beautiful and harsh at the same time. The translation software in their suits struggled with the complexity before producing halting English. "You came. After so long someone came." Jake removed his helmet slowly, a gesture of trust that made Ben curse softly behind him. The air was thin and cold but breathable. Jake met the alien's eyes and saw intelligence there and pain and desperate need. "We're here to help," Jake said simply. The alien, who they would later learn was named Swift Running Waters, gripped Jake's shoulder with surprising strength. "Please," he said in broken English that the translator barely managed. "Come. There is one who needs help most." He led them deeper into the survivors' shelter, past the watching eyes of his people. In a small alcove, wrapped in thermal blankets that had long since lost their effectiveness, they found something impossible. A human woman sat there, covered in the same ritual scars as the aliens around her. She wore their clothing and held something precious in her arms. When she looked up, her face was gaunt and marked by years of hardship, but her eyes were human eyes, blue as Earth's sky. In her arms, wrapped in rags, was an infant. The child's skin was a blend of copper and pale pink, its features a mix of human and alien. The woman's lips trembled as she clutched the baby tighter. "Please," she whispered in English. "Please help her. She's starving. My baby is starving." Swift Running Waters knelt beside the woman, his large hand gentle on her shoulder. He looked at Jake with eyes that held the weight of watching too many die. "Help her," he said again. "Please help her. She's starving." Jake felt the moment crystallize around him. Every regulation, every protocol, every rule about first contact and contamination procedures existed for good reasons. But none of those reasons mattered when faced with a dying child and a mother's desperate tears. He touched his communicator. "Liberty, this is Morrison. Prepare medical bay for emergency triage, multiple patients, unknown biology, and prep the cargo bays. We're bringing everyone up." The woman's name was Claire Whitehorse, and her story came out in fragments over the following hours as the Liberty's crew worked to stabilize the survivors. She sat in the medical bay with her daughter clutched tight against her chest, unwilling to let the doctors take the child even though she knew they needed to examine her. Ben Tyler approached slowly, his hands visible and empty, speaking in the soft voice he used with frightened patience. "I need to check your daughter," he said gently. "I can't help her if I don't know what's wrong." Claire's arms tightened around the infant, but finally she nodded. Her hands shook as she passed the tiny bundle to Ben. The child was so light, far too light for her apparent age. Her breathing came in shallow gasps, and her skin had a grayish tinge that made Ben's experienced eye narrow with concern. While Ben worked, Amy sat with Claire and listened to her story. Claire had been an anthropologist assigned to the research vessel Horizon 5 years ago. They had been exploring this same region of space when their ship encountered a phenomenon they didn't understand, something like a tear in space itself. The Horizon had been destroyed. Claire survived in an escape pod, drifting for weeks before the Numunu found her. The Numunu, as the aliens called themselves, had rescued her from certain death. Their ship had been damaged by the same spatial tear that destroyed the Horizon. They brought Claire aboard, treated her injuries, and welcomed her into their community. She learned their language and their ways. The Numunu were a people who valued honor and family above all else. They had songs that spoke of all living things being connected, part of one great spirit that flowed through the universe. Claire's voice softened when she spoke of Standing Bear, the Numunu diplomat who had first learned her language. He was patient and kind, teaching her the ways of his people while learning about humanity from her. Love grew between them slowly, naturally, like a plant finding sunlight. The Numunu had no rules against such unions. They believed that love was sacred regardless of where it bloomed. When Claire became pregnant, the Numunu celebrated. A child born of two peoples was seen as a blessing, a bridge between worlds. But Standing Bear died when the ship crashed on the moon 3 years ago. He had been trying to secure the reactor when it exploded, saving dozens of lives with his sacrifice. Claire had given birth alone, helped by Numunu midwives who did their best despite having no knowledge of human biology. The baby, whom Claire named Hope, was healthy at first. But as the months passed and supplies dwindled, problems emerged. The Numunu food synthesizers couldn't produce nutrition suitable for Hope's mixed biology. Claire's own milk dried up from malnutrition. They tried everything, adapting their remaining supplies, but nothing worked. Hope began to waste away, growing thinner and weaker with each passing day. Swift Running Waters had taken Claire under his protection after Standing Bear's death, declaring her his clan sister in a formal ceremony. He had watched Hope deteriorate and felt the helplessness of a warrior who could fight any enemy except starvation. When the human ship appeared on their sensors, he had begged the clan elders to send a distress call. Some argued against it, saying their pride demanded they die with dignity rather than beg strangers for help. Swift Running Waters had overruled them with the authority of his rank, saying that pride meant nothing if it cost Hope's life. Ben returned from his examination with a grave expression. He pulled Jake aside in the corridor outside medical, where Claire couldn't hear them. His voice was low and urgent. "The child is in critical condition," Ben said. "She's suffering from severe malnutrition, multiple vitamin deficiencies, and her organs are starting to fail. I've never seen anything like her biology. It's human and alien mixed together at the cellular level. Our standard nutrients won't work. I'll need to analyze her metabolism completely and synthesize something specific to her needs." "How long will that take?" Jake asked, though he dreaded the answer. "Days. Maybe a week to be safe." Ben paused. "She has hours, Jake, maybe one day if we're lucky." Jake felt the weight of that statement settle over him. He looked through the medical bay window at Claire, who sat rocking her dying daughter and singing a lullaby in the Numunu language. Swift Running Waters stood nearby, his warrior's face carved with grief. Commander Lisa Perry found Jake in the corridor an hour later. She was his second in command, a woman who believed in rules and order because she had seen what happened when people ignored them. Her dark hair was pulled back severely and her uniform was always perfectly pressed. She respected Jake, but she was worried about the decision he had made. "Captain, we need to talk about the situation," Lisa said. "We've taken 47 aliens onto our ship. We don't know anything about their biology or their culture. We don't know if they're dangerous. We're a research vessel, not a humanitarian aid ship. There are protocols for first contact situations." Jake knew she was right about the protocols. Those rules existed because humanity's early encounters with alien species had sometimes gone badly. There were procedures to follow, authorities to consult, safeguards to maintain. Taking the Numunu aboard without proper clearance violated dozens of regulations. "What would you have me do?" Jake asked quietly. "Leave them to die? Leave that baby to starve?" "We should have contacted Earth Command first," Lisa replied. "Waited for instructions." "The response time is 11 days, Jake said. That child will be dead in one day. All of those people might be dead in weeks. Should I wait for permission to save lives?" Lisa didn't have an answer for that. She looked through the window at Claire and Hope, and something in her rigid posture softened slightly. "This could end your career," she said. "It could end all our careers. Then it ends," Jake said simply. "I'm not going to let a child die because I was afraid of paperwork." In the medical bay, Hope began to cry, a weak sound that barely carried. Claire held her closer, tears streaming down her scarred face. Swift Running Waters placed his large hand on Claire's shoulder and spoke in Numunu. The translator rendered his words awkwardly. "The humans will help. They came when no one else would. They will not let Hope die." But even as he spoke, he watched the human doctors working frantically, and he saw the doubt in their eyes. He had led warriors into battle against impossible odds. He had faced death without fear. But watching this tiny child slip away, knowing there was nothing his strength or courage could do to help, was harder than any battle he had ever fought. Jake entered the medical bay and knelt beside Claire. He looked at the infant in her arms, at the shallow rise and fall of her tiny chest. "We're going to do everything we can," he promised. Claire looked up at him with eyes that had seen too much loss. "She's all I have left of him," she whispered. "Please don't let her die, please." Jake had no answer except to squeeze her hand and hope that his crew was good enough, fast enough to save one small life. The Liberty's cargo bays had never been designed to house refugees. Engineer Kyle Santos worked through the night converting storage spaces into living quarters, running power lines and setting up portable life support units. He was a young man, barely 30, with oil-stained hands and an innovative mind that saw solutions where others saw only problems. Around him, other crew members hauled supplies and assembled bunks, transforming their research vessel into something it was never meant to be. The Numunu survivors watched these preparations with confusion and wonder. Their own people, the Great Confederacy of Free Peoples, had declared them lost after their distress beacon went unanswered for 6 months. The Numunu culture valued strength and self-sufficiency. To be abandoned was shameful, but to be saved by strangers was almost incomprehensible. Yet here were these humans, these small, soft creatures, working themselves to exhaustion for people they had just met. Swift running waters moved among his people, organizing them and maintaining order despite their weakened state. He assigned the warriors to help where they could, not just to be useful but to preserve their dignity. A Numunu warrior who could not contribute had no purpose. The humans seemed to understand this instinctively, accepting help even when it would have been faster to work alone. In the medical bay, Ben Tyler had assembled every piece of equipment that might help analyze Hope's unique biology. His small team included Amy Fletcher, whose xenobiology expertise was suddenly more valuable than any survey data, and Megan Walsh, a young biologist who specialized in cellular structures. They worked with equipment designed for studying alien microorganisms, now repurposed to save one hybrid child's life. The problem was complex beyond anything they had encountered. Hope's cells were neither fully human nor fully Numunu, but something new entirely. Her metabolism processed certain nutrients the way human cells did, while other processes followed Numunu patterns. Nothing in their database offered guidance. They were inventing a new field of medicine in real time, with a ticking clock counting down to a child's death. Her cells need certain amino acids that humans require, Amy said, studying the latest scan results. But they also need this copper-based compound that the Numunu use. If we give her too much of either, we could poison her. We need to find the balance, Ben replied, his eyes red from lack of sleep. But we can't just guess. If we get this wrong, we kill her. Megan had been quiet, studying the data from a different angle. She was the youngest member of the science team, fresh from university and still carrying the optimism of someone who believed every problem had a solution if you looked hard enough. She pulled up a comparison chart that made the others stop and look. What if we're thinking about this wrong? She suggested. Hope's cells aren't trying to be human or Numunu. They're something new. Look at this pattern here. It's similar to how certain earth plants process nutrients through photosynthesis. Ben leaned closer, following her reasoning. Hope's hybrid cells responded to certain electromagnetic frequencies in ways that neither human nor Numunu cells did alone. It was a property that emerged from the combination, not present in either parent species separately. If we can stimulate her cells with the right frequency while introducing nutrients, Megan continued, we might be able to kickstart her metabolism. Get her body processing food properly instead of trying to force-feed her nutrients she can't absorb. It was a long shot, a theory based on observation rather than proven science. But it was the best idea anyone had come up with in 16 hours of desperate research. Ben made the decision quickly. Let's try it. Kyle, I need you to modify one of our electromagnetic field generators. Kyle Santos appeared in medical 30 minutes later, having sprinted from the cargo bay. Ben explained what they needed, and Kyle listened with the focused intensity of someone who understood that lives depended on his skill. He disappeared into the equipment storage and emerged 2 hours later, with a device that looked like it had been assembled from spare parts. Because it had. This should generate the frequencies you need, Kyle said, showing them the controls. I've built in safeguards, but you'll need to monitor her vital signs constantly. Claire had been sitting with Hope for nearly 20 hours straight, refusing to sleep or eat. She watched as Ben and his team set up the new equipment around her daughter. Swift running waters stood beside her, his presence a silent promise that she was not alone in this vigil. What if it doesn't work? Claire asked, her voice barely a whisper. Then we try something else, Ben replied. We don't give up. They began the treatment at hour 19 of the crisis. The electromagnetic field generator hummed softly as it powered up, bathing Hope in frequencies invisible to human eyes. Ben administered the synthesized nutrients through an IV line so small it seemed impossible. Every member of the medical team watched the monitors looking for any sign of improvement or distress. For 10 minutes, nothing changed. Hope's vital signs remained dangerously weak, hovering at the edge of system failure. Claire gripped Swift running water's hand so tightly that her knuckles turned white. He stood like a statue, his warrior's discipline the only thing keeping him from showing the fear that threatened to overwhelm him. Then Hope's oxygen absorption rate ticked upward, just slightly, barely enough to register, but it was there. Her heart rate strengthened. Her cellular activity increased. The monitors showed metabolic processes activating that had been dormant since her birth. "It's working," Megan breathed, afraid that speaking too loudly might break the spell. Hope's breathing deepened. Color began to return to her grayish skin, a healthy blend of her parents' tones. She opened her eyes, truly opened them for the first time in days. They were green, a color neither fully human nor Numunu but uniquely hers. Claire burst into tears, pulling her daughter close and sobbing with relief. Swift running waters placed his hand on Hope's tiny head, and his voice when he spoke was thick with emotion. "You honored the bond between all living things," he said to Jake, who had been standing in the doorway watching. The translator struggled with the phrase, but the meaning was clear. "You saw a child in need and you helped, even though she was not your own. This is the mark of a true warrior spirit." Jake felt the weight of what had just happened settling over him. They had saved one child's life, but the implications reached far beyond this moment. Somewhere on Earth, authorities were receiving his report of unauthorized first contact and mass rescue of aliens. His career was likely over. But looking at Claire's tears of joy and Hope's bright green eyes, he found he didn't care. Lisa Perry appeared beside him, her expression unreadable. "Earth Command has responded," she said quietly. "Admiral Sophie Grant wants to speak with you personally." Jake nodded, expecting the worst. But when Lisa handed him the communication tablet, he saw something unexpected in her eyes. It might have been respect, or perhaps understanding that some rules deserve to be broken. "Whatever happens," Lisa said, "you made the right choice." In the cargo bay, the Numunu survivors had heard that Hope was recovering. They began to sing, a harmony of voices that spoke of gratitude and hope. The human crew stopped their work to listen, moved by music from another world that somehow expressed feelings everyone understood. Two species brought together by crisis, beginning to see each other not as aliens but as people. Admiral Sophie Grant's face filled the communication screen in Jake's quarters. She was a woman in her 60s with steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen 3 decades of deep space operations. Jake stood at attention, prepared for the reprimand he knew was coming. Instead, the Admiral studied him for a long moment before speaking. "Captain Morrison, I've reviewed your report on the situation aboard the Liberty," she said. Her voice was measured, giving nothing away. "You violated first contact protocols, took on refugees without authorization, and committed resources to a humanitarian mission outside your mandate." "Yes, ma'am," Jake replied. "I take full responsibility for those decisions." "I'm sure you do." Admiral Grant leaned back in her chair. "I'm also looking at medical reports showing you saved the life of a hybrid child and 47 survivors who would have died without intervention." The Numunu distress beacon had been broadcasting for 3 years. 3 years, Captain, and no one came for them until you did." Jake remained silent, uncertain where this was going. "Earth Command is fast-tracking the Liberty for priority return," the Admiral continued. "We're mobilizing humanitarian and diplomatic teams to meet you. The story has already leaked to the media. Senator Alex Whitehorse has made sure everyone knows his daughter is alive and that she has a granddaughter who's half alien. Public opinion is overwhelmingly in support of your actions." The Admiral's expression softened slightly. "You put me in a difficult position, Jake, but you also did what was right. Come home. We'll sort out the paperwork later." The transmission ended, leaving Jake staring at the blank screen. Lisa, who had been waiting outside, entered the quarters. "So we're not all getting court-martialed?" she asked with the hint of a smile. "Apparently not," Jake replied, still processing the Admiral's words. "We're going home." The Liberty began its long journey back to Earth, carrying nearly double its intended crew. Every system was stretched to capacity. Water rations were reduced to minimum safe levels. Power was carefully allocated to essential systems only. The ship's gardens, designed to supplement their food supply, now had to feed dozens of extra mouths. Yet no one complained. Something remarkable was happening aboard the Liberty that transcended mere survival. The Numunu, recovered enough from their ordeal to interact fully, began teaching the human crew about their culture. Swift running waters held daily sessions in the cargo bay, demonstrating the warrior arts of his people. These were not just fighting techniques, but a philosophy of movement and awareness. Human security personnel found themselves learning from an alien warrior who moved with grace despite his large size. Kate Sanders, a young engineer who had helped Kyle convert the cargo bays, discovered she had a talent for the Numunu martial forms. Swift-running waters noticed her dedication and took her as a formal student, an honor rarely given to outsiders. The lessons became popular entertainment, with crew members gathering to watch the practices during their off hours. The Numunu elders, led by a woman named Dancing Cloud, began teaching their songs and stories. Dancing Cloud was ancient by Numunu standards, her copper skin weathered and her movements slow but deliberate. She spoke of the old ways when the Numunu first reached for the stars. Their philosophy centered on the belief that all living things were connected through something they called the Great Spirit. Every action rippled outward, affecting the whole. To harm another was to harm oneself. To help another was to strengthen the entire web of life. The human crew found these teachings resonating with ideas from Earth's own native cultures. Amy Fletcher spent hours recording Dancing Cloud's stories, recognizing their anthropological value. But more than that, she found wisdom in the words that made her think about her own place in the universe. Claire became the bridge between both peoples. Her daughter Hope, growing stronger each day with the proper treatment, became a living symbol of what cooperation between species could achieve. Hope's laughter in the corridors lifted spirits during the hardest days when supplies ran low and tempers grew short. The child knew no difference between human and Numunu, accepting care and affection from anyone willing to give it. But the journey was not without tensions. Some of the Numunu elders struggled with their dependence on human charity. The Numunu were a proud people who had built an interstellar civilization through strength and self-reliance. To be rescued, to owe their lives to strangers, wounded their pride in ways that were hard to articulate. Swift-running waters spent many evenings talking with these elders, reminding them that accepting help was not weakness but wisdom. Among the human crew, some worried about the consequences of what they had done. A few junior officers questioned whether Jake's decision had been right, not from cruelty but from fear. They worried about their careers, about whether they would be blamed for violating protocols. These concerns were valid, born from the reality that good intentions did not always protect people from bureaucratic consequences. Jake addressed these concerns in a crew meeting 6 weeks into the return journey. He gathered everyone in the main common area, humans and Numunu together. "I know some of you are worried about what happens when we reach Earth," Jake said, looking around at the assembled faces. "I know you're concerned about your careers and your futures. Those concerns are valid, but I want you to understand something. What we did here, saving these people, saving that child, this is the best thing any of us will ever do. If there are consequences, I'll face them, but I will never regret the choice we made." Swift-running waters stood then, speaking in Numunu with the translator rendering his words into English. "My people have a saying," he began. "A warrior who saves a life is worth more than a warrior who takes 100. You humans came when no one else would. You shared your food when you had little to spare. You gave comfort to the grieving and healing to the sick. These are not the actions of a weak people. These are the actions of people with strong spirits." Dancing Cloud added her voice, her ancient face serene. "You have shown us that the Great Spirit flows through all beings, not just those we recognize as kin. This is a lesson we thought we knew, but you have taught us its truth." The Numunu began to sing then, a harmony that filled the common area. It was a song of gratitude, their voices blending in patterns that human ears found both alien and beautiful. When the song ended, the humans joined them in applause, and for a moment, it was easy to forget they were different species at all. Kyle Santos had been working with Numunu craftsmen to combine human fabrication technology with traditional Numunu methods. The results were stunning. They created hybrid tools that were more efficient than what either species could produce alone. Decorative panels for the cargo bay walls that were both functional and beautiful. Small gifts and trinkets that crew members could keep as memories of this journey. Hope's first birthday came during the 7th week of travel. Claire marked the occasion with a cake made from their limited supplies and decorated with symbols from both human and Numunu traditions. The entire ship celebrated, understanding that this child represented something new and precious. Hope took her first steps that day, walking from Claire's arms to swift-running waters, who caught her gently and laughed with joy. As Earth grew closer on the navigation screens, anticipation built aboard the Liberty. The Numunu were nervous about meeting more humans, unsure how they would be received by the planet's billions. The human crew was nervous about the official response to their actions. But underneath the nervousness was hope, fragile but real, that something good could come from the choices they had made. Jake stood on the bridge as Earth finally came into view after months of travel. The blue-green world filled the view screen, home to billions of humans and now, for the first time, home to 47 Numunu refugees and one precious hybrid child. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The Liberty entered Earth orbit on a cold morning in March. Below them, the planet gleamed with cities and oceans, clouds swirling in patterns that made the Numunu gasp with wonder. Many had never seen a living world like this. Their own home planet was drier, with vast plains and smaller seas. Earth's abundance of water was almost shocking to them. Jake received clearance to dock at the main orbital station, where Admiral Grant and her teams waited. The Numunu prepared themselves with quiet dignity, donning their best remaining ceremonial clothing. Swift Running Waters wore his warrior's marks with pride, though his clothes were worn and patched. Dancing Cloud moved slowly, her ancient body struggling even in the lighter gravity of the ship. Claire dressed Hope in a small outfit that combined human and Numunu styles, a visible representation of the child's dual heritage. The docking process took 2 hours. When the airlock finally opened, Jake led his crew and the Numunu survivors into the station's receiving bay. What greeted them took his breath away. Hundreds of people lined the corridors. Station personnel, diplomats, medical teams, and media representatives all stood waiting. When the first Numunu emerged, following Swift Running Waters' proud stride, the crowd erupted in applause. It was spontaneous and genuine, the sound echoing through the metal corridors. Several people were crying. Admiral Grant stepped forward, her uniform immaculate and her bearing formal. She rendered a crisp salute to Jake, who returned it with surprise. Then, to everyone's shock, she turned to Swift Running Waters and attempted a Numunu greeting gesture, touching her forehead to his chest in the sign of respect. "Welcome to Earth," she said, speaking slowly so the translators could work properly. "You are safe here. You are welcome here." Swift Running Waters, the warrior who had faced death without fear, found his voice catching in his throat. He returned the greeting and spoke in Numunu. "We are grateful beyond words. Your people have shown us that honor and kindness exist even among strangers." The media descended then, but Admiral Grant's security teams kept them at a respectful distance. The coverage would be everywhere within hours, but for now, the survivors needed rest and medical attention. The Numunu were guided to temporary quarters that had been prepared with help from Claire's recorded notes about their culture. Everything from the temperature to the lighting had been adjusted to make them comfortable. Claire was reunited with her father, Senator Alex Whitehorse. He was a man in his 70s with long gray hair and a face that showed both age and the strength of his native heritage. When he saw his daughter, alive after 5 years of believing her dead, he wept openly. When he saw his granddaughter, the hybrid child who should not exist, he held her as if she were made of glass. "She's beautiful," he whispered. "She's perfect." Over the following days, the story of the Liberty's rescue mission exploded across Earth's media networks. Footage of Hope's near-death and miraculous recovery was broadcast everywhere. Images of Claire's tearful reunion with her father touched billions of hearts. But most powerful were the recordings of Swift Running Waters' desperate plea for help and Jake's decision to violate protocols to save lives. Public opinion formed quickly and overwhelmingly in support of Jake's actions. People saw in the Numunu something of humanity's own native cultures. The cultural parallels were striking and deliberate in the Numunu's own choosing, as they had modeled their society on values they found worthy. The story resonated deeply across Earth's diverse populations. Political leaders scrambled to respond to the public mood. The Humanitarian Council declared the Numunu refugees to be under Earth's protection. Housing was constructed at an unprecedented speed. Temporary communities designed with input from Numunu elders about their needs and preferences. Medical teams trained in hybrid biology worked with Ben, Tyler to ensure Hope's continued care and to prepare for other potential hybrid children in the future. The scientific community reacted with excitement and concern in equal measure. The existence of a viable human-alien hybrid opened questions about biology and evolution that would take years to answer. Universities fought for the opportunity to study Hope's development, while ethics boards worked to ensure the child's privacy and rights were protected. Jake was summoned to Earth for a formal hearing 2 weeks after their arrival. He expected at best a reprimand, at worst to be stripped of his command. Instead, he walked into a chamber filled with the Humanitarian Council, several admirals, and Senator Whitehorse. What followed was not a trial but a ceremony. Admiral Grant read from a formal document, her voice carrying through the chamber. Captain Jake Morrison, your actions aboard the Liberty demonstrated the highest ideals of humanity. When faced with a choice between protocol and compassion, you chose compassion. When faced with a choice between safety and service, you chose service. You saved 47 lives and one precious child who represents the future of interspecies cooperation. She paused, then continued with a smile. You also gave me a lot of paperwork, but it was worth it. The chamber erupted in laughter. Admiral Grant presented Jake with the Star of Valor, humanity's highest civilian honor. As she pinned it to his uniform, she whispered, "You did good, Captain. Don't ever doubt that." Jake gave a short speech, uncomfortable with the attention but understanding its necessity. "I didn't do anything special," he said. "I just saw people who needed help and I helped them. That's not heroism. That's just being human. Or at least it should be." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "We had protocols that told me to wait, to ask permission, to follow proper channels. Those protocols exist for good reasons. But that day I realized something. We weren't following our best nature when we made those protocols. We were following our fears. Fear of the unknown, fear of making mistakes, fear of taking responsibility." Jake looked around the chamber at the assembled leaders. "That day we chose to follow our hearts instead. We chose to see people, not aliens. We chose to see a child who was starving, not a diplomatic complication. I hope we keep making that choice." The speech was brief, but it was broadcast across Earth and would be quoted for years to come. The phrase, "follow our hearts instead," became a rallying cry for the humanitarian movement that followed. Swift Running Waters attended the ceremony, along with Dancing Cloud and several other Numunu elders. Afterward, Swift Running Waters approached Jake privately. "My people have decided something," he said through the translator. "We wish to stay on Earth if you will have us. Not as refugees seeking shelter, but as partners seeking friendship." Jake felt the significance of those words. "Earth would be honored," he replied. "There is more," Swift Running Waters continued. "Our home government, the Confederacy, they have finally made contact. They are surprised to learn we live. Some are grateful to humans. Others are suspicious, wondering what you want from us in return for saving us." "We want nothing," Jake said honestly, "except maybe friendship." Swift Running Waters smiled, a gesture that looked almost human. "That is what makes it so hard for them to understand. In the galaxy, no one helps without expecting something back. You have done something rare, something that will echo beyond this moment." He placed his hand on Jake's shoulder in the Numunu gesture of deep respect. "You have changed my people's understanding of the universe, and perhaps you have changed the universe itself." That evening, Jake stood with Claire and Hope in the gardens of the Numunu settlement. The temporary structures had become a community surprisingly quickly. Numunu children played with human children from nearby areas. Adults from both species worked together on projects that benefited everyone. Hope toddled through the garden, chasing butterflies with the determined focus of a 1-year-old. She was healthy now, thriving in ways that seemed impossible just months before. Claire watched her daughter with eyes that still held wonder. "Thank you," Claire said quietly, "for everything." "You don't need to thank me," Jake replied. "Yes, I do," Claire insisted. "You saved my daughter's life. You gave us both a future. That deserves thanks." They watched Hope together as the sun set over Earth, painting the sky in colors that made the Numunu sing their evening prayers. Two species, learning to live together, starting with one rescued child and 47 survivors who refused to give up hope. The integration of the Numunu into Earth society proceeded with surprising smoothness over the following year. The temporary settlements became permanent communities, with architecture that blended human and Numunu styles. Buildings rose from the ground with sweeping lines and natural materials, efficient and beautiful in ways that neither species could have achieved alone. Swift Running Waters took a human name, becoming Luke Waters, though he kept his Numunu identity strong and visible. He opened a school teaching Numunu philosophy and martial arts in a building designed to accommodate both human and Numunu students. His classes were always full, with waiting lists that stretched for months. People came not just to learn fighting techniques, but to understand the Numunu way of seeing the world. Luke's teaching emphasized the interconnection of all living things. He demonstrated how a warrior moved not just with strength, but with awareness of everything around them. His students learned that true power came from harmony, not dominance. These lessons resonated particularly with young people who were searching for meaning in an increasingly complex universe. Kate Sanders, the engineer who had become Luke's first human student, earned her warrior's marks in a formal ceremony. She was the first human to receive this honor, and the event was attended by hundreds of people from both species. The marks were applied using traditional Numunu methods, each line representing a lesson learned and a challenge overcome. Kate wore them with pride, understanding they represented not just personal achievement but the bridging of two cultures. Claire worked with the newly formed Human Numunu Relations Council, helping to smooth the countless small misunderstandings that arose when two species tried to live together. She understood both cultures intimately, having lived as both human and adopted Numunu. Her insights prevented dozens of potential conflicts and helped create frameworks for cooperation that would serve for generations. Hope grew into a bright and energetic toddler, attending a special school designed for hybrid children. Though she was currently the only one, others would follow. Several Numunu and human couples had formed relationships, drawn together by mutual respect and genuine affection. The biological challenges of creating hybrid children were significant, but Ben Tyler and his team had developed techniques that made it possible. Hope would not be alone for long. The child was remarkable not just for her biology but for her nature. She moved between human and Numunu cultures effortlessly, speaking both languages fluently before her second birthday. She had her mother's curiosity and her father's strength of spirit. People who met her saw the future made flesh, a living promise that two species could create something beautiful together. But not everything was harmonious. The Numunu home government, the Confederacy of Free Peoples, finally established formal diplomatic contact with Earth 6 months after the rescue. The meeting was tense from the start. The Confederacy's ambassadors were proud beings who struggled with the fact that their abandoned people had been saved by an unknown alien species. Ambassador Stone River, the Confederacy's chief diplomat, met with Earth's leaders in a summit that was broadcast across both worlds. He was an imposing figure even among the tall Numunu, his ceremonial armor gleaming with marks of high rank. He spoke with the careful precision of someone navigating dangerous political waters. "The Confederacy is grateful for Earth's assistance to our lost people," Stone River said, his words translated for the billions watching. "However, we must understand your motivations. In our experience, no one helps without expecting something in return." Senator Whitehorse, speaking for Earth, replied with equal care. "We expect nothing. We helped because people were dying. That's reason enough." "Perhaps for individuals," Stone River countered, "but governments always have interests. What does Earth want from the Confederacy?" The question hung in the air, loaded with centuries of Numunu experience with galactic politics. In their view, every action had a price. Kindness was currency to be spent. Trust was a tool for manipulation. The idea that humans had helped simply because it was right seemed naive or deceptive. Senator Whitehorse looked at his granddaughter, playing quietly in the corner of the summit room with toys from both cultures. When he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of personal truth. "My daughter was lost. She was rescued by your people when they had every reason to leave her to die. They took her in, treated her as one of their own, and gave her a family. When my granddaughter was starving, your warrior begged humans for help. We gave it. That's what civilized people do. They help each other." He leaned forward, his old eyes sharp. "If you want to know what Earth wants from the Confederacy, it's simple. We want friendship. We want to learn from you and teach you what we know. We want to build something better together than either of us could build alone. If that's too complicated for your politics to understand, then perhaps your politics need to change." The summit ended without formal agreements, but seeds had been planted. Some in the Confederacy began to question their cynical view of the universe. Others remained suspicious, certain that Earth's generosity hid darker motives. The debate would continue for years. On Earth, surveys revealed a startling fact that changed everything. Deep space probes had detected hundreds of other vessels lost in the void, from dozens of different species. The Numunu were not unique in being abandoned by their governments. The galaxy was full of people waiting for someone to care enough to save them. This revelation sparked intense debate across Earth. Some argued that humanity could not save everyone, that resources were finite and Earth's own needs had to come first. Others insisted that if humanity had the ability to help, it had the responsibility to do so. The argument split along familiar political lines but also created strange new coalitions. Jake found himself thrust into the center of this debate. He was asked to speak at conferences, to advise policymakers, to lend his experience to the growing humanitarian movement. He was uncomfortable with the attention but understood its necessity. At a major humanitarian conference in Geneva, Jake spoke to an audience of thousands with millions more watching remotely. "I'm not a politician or a philosopher," he began. "I'm just a ship captain who made a choice. But I've learned something over this past year. The choice I made that day wasn't unusual. It wasn't heroic. It was human." He paused, looking out at the assembled faces. Every day, people all over Earth make choices to help others. They donate food, they volunteer their time, they take in refugees, they care for the sick. We've been doing this for thousands of years. It's part of who we are. Jake's voice grew stronger. Now we have the ability to extend that compassion beyond our own planet. We can reach people who are lost and alone in the darkness of space. The question isn't whether we can do it. The question is whether we will do it. Whether we'll follow our best nature or let our fears hold us back. He thought of hope, of Claire's tears, of Luke's desperate plea. "I think we should help. Not because it's easy or profitable or politically convenient, but because it's right. Because when we look back on this moment in history, I want us to be proud of what we chose to do." The speech resonated across Earth and beyond. Support for deep space humanitarian missions grew. Governments allocated resources. Private companies donated ships and supplies. Most importantly, people volunteered. Thousands of humans wanted to be part of something larger than themselves. To reach out to the lost and tell them they were not forgotten. Luke Waters spoke at the same conference, offering the Numunu perspective. "My people were lost," he said. "We had given up hope. We thought we would die alone, forgotten by our own government and unknown to the universe. Then humans came, not because they had to, not because they would benefit, but because they chose compassion over convenience." His voice carried the weight of lived experience. This is not weakness. This is the greatest strength any species can possess. The strength to care for others even when it costs you something. My people are learning this lesson. Perhaps the entire galaxy needs to learn it too. That evening, Jake walked through the Numunu settlement with Luke. Children from both species ran past them, playing games that mixed human and Numunu traditions. Adults worked together on community projects, their different strengths complementing each other. "You've changed everything," Luke said quietly. "Not just for my people, but for how the galaxy sees itself." "We just helped," Jake replied. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," Luke corrected gently. "Not anyone. That's the point." 1 year after the Liberty's return to Earth, construction began on a new kind of vessel. The ship was designed from the ground up as a humanitarian rescue craft, combining the best of human and Numunu engineering. It was larger than the Liberty but faster, with advanced medical facilities and life support systems that could accommodate dozens of different species biologies. The ship's name was chosen through a global vote. Millions of people participated and the winner was overwhelming. They called her the Promise of Hope, named for the hybrid child whose near death had sparked a humanitarian revolution. Jake stood in the shipyard, watching the Promise of Hope take shape. The vessel was beautiful, her hull covered in patterns that incorporated both human precision and Numunu artistic sensibility. Solar panels spread like wings, capturing energy with efficiency that neither species could have achieved alone. Her engines were powerful enough to reach distant star systems in months rather than years. Amy Fletcher had been appointed chief science officer of the new vessel. She walked the shipyard with Jake, reviewing systems and making final adjustments. Her expertise in xenobiology had grown tremendously over the past year, and she was now considered one of Earth's leading experts on alien life. "We can house up to 300 refugees comfortably," Amy explained, showing Jake the converted cargo bays. "The medical facilities can handle 20 critical patients simultaneously. We've got synthesis equipment that can produce nutrients for any known biology, and if we encounter something new, we can analyze and adapt." Ben Tyler would be leading the medical team. His experience saving Hope had made him the obvious choice. He had spent the past year training a diverse team of doctors and nurses in hybrid biology and alien medicine. They were ready for anything. Kyle Santos had designed most of the ship's hybrid systems. His innovative approach to combining human and Numenu technology had earned him recognition as one of the era's great engineers. He was young for such responsibility, but no one questioned his ability. The Promise of Hope was his masterpiece. Luke Waters would serve as head of security and cultural liaison. His presence on the crew signaled Numenu commitment to the mission. More than that, his understanding of both cultures made him invaluable for first contact situations. 70 Numenu had volunteered for the crew, eager to repay the debt they felt they owed humanity by helping other lost peoples. Claire had been offered the position of Chief Cultural Officer. She struggled with the decision, knowing it would mean years away from Earth. But Hope was old enough for school, and Senator Whitehorse assured his daughter he would care for his granddaughter with all the love and protection she needed. Claire accepted, understanding that her unique perspective was needed on this mission. The crew of 200 was selected from thousands of applicants. They came from every nation on Earth and represented the full diversity of humanity. The Numenu crew members were equally diverse, representing different clans and traditions within their culture. Together, they would venture into the unknown to save people who had been forgotten. The launch ceremony was attended by millions in person and billions remotely. The Promise of Hope sat on the launch pad, gleaming in the morning sun. On the platform, dignitaries from Earth and the Numenu Confederacy gathered to speak. The presence of Confederacy representatives was significant. Though relations remained complicated, they had acknowledged the value of the humanitarian mission. Ambassador Stone River spoke, his earlier suspicion tempered by a year of watching humanity's genuine commitment to helping others. The Confederacy has learned something from Earth, he said. We learned that our cynicism, our assumption that everyone acts from selfish interest, blinded us to the possibility of genuine compassion. We abandoned our people because we calculated that saving them was not worth the cost. Earth taught us that some things cannot be measured in simple costs and benefits. He paused, his copper skin gleaming in the sunlight. We are grateful. More than that, we are humbled. And we commit to joining this mission in whatever way we can. The Confederacy will share our star charts, our knowledge of lost vessels, and our resources. Together we will reach those who need help. Admiral Grant spoke next, her voice carrying across the assembled crowd. Today we launch not just a ship but a promise that no one will be left to die alone in the darkness of space, a promise that when people cry out for help, someone will answer. This is humanity at its best, reaching out to the stars not to conquer but to save. Jake stood at the podium last, uncomfortable as always with public speaking, but understanding its necessity. A year ago, I was a research captain following routine survey protocols, he began. Then we found people who needed help and we helped them. That simple choice changed everything, not because it was special, but because it reminded us of who we are. He looked at the Promise of Hope, at the crew members standing proudly beside their ship. This mission will be hard. We'll face dangers we can't predict. We'll encounter species we don't understand. We'll be tested in ways we can't imagine. But I know this crew. I know their hearts. They're ready. Jake's daughter Emma stood in the crew formation, wearing the junior science officer uniform with pride. She had fought hard to be selected for this mission, proving herself through skill rather than relying on her father's reputation. Jake caught her eye and saw determination there and love and the courage to face the unknown. We go to keep a promise, Jake concluded. A promise made to a starving child and her desperate mother. A promise that kindness matters, that compassion is strength, that we are all connected under the stars. Let's go keep that promise. The crowd erupted in applause as Jake stepped down from the podium. The crew boarded the Promise of Hope through ceremonial pathways lined with well-wishers. Luke Waters walked beside Jake, his warrior's bearing mixed with something that looked like nervous anticipation. Are you ready for this? Jake asked. I fought in battles where I thought I would die, Luke replied. I survived the crash and the long wait for rescue. I learned to live in a world not my own. Yes, I'm ready. Claire boarded with tears in her eyes, having just said goodbye to Hope. Her daughter had been brave, understanding in the way children do that her mother was going to help other children who needed her. Senator Whitehorse held Hope's hand, promising his daughter that he would keep the child safe and loved until Claire returned. The bridge of the Promise of Hope was a marvel of integrated design. Human efficiency met Numunu artistry in a space that felt both functional and alive. The crew took their stations with practiced precision. Amy ran through final system checks. Ben confirmed medical bay readiness. Kyle monitored the hybrid engines that would carry them to distant stars. Jake sat in the captain's chair, feeling the weight of responsibility settle over him. This was different from the Liberty. That had been an accidental rescue mission. This was intentional, a commitment to seek out those in need and help them. The stakes were higher, the dangers greater, but the purpose was clear. All stations report ready, Emma called from her science station. Jake took a breath and spoke the words that would begin their journey. Navigation, set course for the nearest distress beacon. Full speed. The Promise of Hope lifted from Earth, her engines blazing with power. She climbed through the atmosphere and into the darkness of space, carrying 200 souls on a mission to save thousands more. Behind her, Earth watched and hoped and believed that this was the beginning of something important. In the cargo hold, preserved in a place of honor, sat a piece of the original crashed Numunu vessel. Etched into it in both languages were words that had become the mission statement for this new era. We are all one people under the stars. When one suffers, we all suffer. When one is saved, we all rise together. The words were simple, but they carried the weight of everything that had happened. They were a reminder of where this mission had started, with a desperate plea and a dying child. They were a promise about where it would go, reaching across the galaxy to tell the lost and forgotten that someone cared. The Promise of Hope engaged her faster than light drives and leaped into the unknown, carrying hope to those who had none. The journey had begun and nothing would ever be the same. The Promise of Hope traveled through space for 3 weeks before reaching their first target. The distress beacon was old, broadcasting for nearly 7 years without response. It came from a vessel belonging to the Keshari, an insectoid species that the Confederacy knew but had little contact with. The Keshari were merchants and traders, not warriors or explorers. This particular ship had been carrying families when disaster struck. Jake stood on the bridge as they approached the damaged vessel. It was smaller than the Numunu ship had been, its hull cracked open by what looked like weapons fire. The Keshari had been attacked, not victims of natural disaster but of pirates who had left them to die after taking everything of value. Life signs are weak, Emma reported from her science station. I'm reading maybe 30 individuals, possibly fewer. Their biology is very different from anything we've encountered. Ben Tyler was already preparing medical bay for alien biology they had never treated. The Keshari breathed different gases than humans or Numunu. Their body temperature was lower. Their nutritional needs were completely unknown. But Ben and his team had trained for exactly this scenario. Luke Waters led the security team on the rescue mission. They found the Keshari huddled in the one section of their ship that still had minimal life support. The aliens were about 4 feet tall, covered in chitinous plates of deep purple and green. Their multiple limbs trembled with weakness, and their compound eyes were dim with despair. The Keshari leader, whose name the translators rendered as Brightwing, stared at the rescuers with what might have been confusion. Her translator, damaged but functional, produced halting English. Why come? We have nothing. Pirates took everything. Luke knelt to bring himself to her eye level, his large frame making the gesture awkward but sincere. We didn't come for things. We came for you. The rescue took 8 hours. The Keshari were carefully moved to the Promise of Hope, where Ben's team worked to stabilize them. The medical bay became a scene of controlled chaos, as doctors and nurses adapted their techniques to treat alien biology in real time. Amy Fletcher worked alongside them, analyzing Keshari cellular structure and helping synthesize nutrients they could actually process. 5 of the Keshari didn't make it. They were too weak, had been starving for too long. Ben stood over their bodies with tears in his eyes, feeling the weight of lives he couldn't save. Claire found him there hours later, staring at the sheet-covered forms. You saved 25, she said gently. 25 people who would have died without you. 5 died anyway, Ben replied, his voice hollow. Yes, Claire agreed. And that's tragic. But don't lose sight of the 25 living, breathing people who have a future now because of what you did. The Keshari who survived were traumatized, not just by their ordeal, but by the concept of being rescued. In their culture, weakness was shameful. To need help was to admit failure. To accept help was to become indebted. Brightwing struggled with this, her pride warring with her gratitude. Claire worked with her over the following days, sharing her own story of being rescued by the Numunu. She explained how accepting help was not weakness but wisdom, how interdependence was stronger than independence. The lessons were hard for Brightwing to absorb. Generations of cultural programming fighting against new understanding. But slowly, something changed. The young Kashari, especially the children, adapted more quickly. They played with human and Numunu children in the recreation areas, learning that friendship crossed species boundaries. They listened to Dancing Cloud's stories about the Great Spirit connecting all living things. They watched Luke teach his martial arts with philosophy woven through every movement. 2 months after rescuing the Kashari, the Promise of Hope found another ship. This one belonged to the Vorath, a species of aquatic beings who lived in pressurized water environments. Their ship had suffered a coolant leak that poisoned their water supply. Kyle Santos worked for days to design new filtration systems compatible with Vorath biology. The engineering was complex, requiring him to essentially redesign their entire life support system while keeping 63 Vorath alive. He succeeded, but barely. The strain showed on his face as he collapsed in exhaustion after the last Vorath was stabilized. Kate Sanders found him sleeping in the engineering bay, surrounded by jury-rigged equipment that had saved dozens of lives through sheer innovative will. The rescues continued. A crystalline ship that communicated through light patterns and needed specific radiation to survive. A species called the Tender Ones who were so psychologically fragile that rescue itself traumatized them, requiring weeks of careful psychological support. A mixed crew of 5 different species who had banded together for survival after their individual ships were destroyed in the same spatial anomaly. Each rescue brought new challenges. Each species required different approaches, different techniques, different understanding. The crew of the Promise of Hope learned and adapted, becoming skilled at first contact under crisis conditions. They made mistakes. They lost people despite their best efforts. But they kept going, kept learning, kept reaching out to those who needed help. 5 months into their mission, they received a transmission from Earth. The message was from Senator Whitehorse, marked urgent. Jake's hand shook as he opened it, fearing bad news about Hope. Instead, he found a video message. Hope appeared on screen, now 3 years old and growing beautifully. She was healthy and happy, playing in the gardens of the Numunu settlement under her grandfather's watchful eye. But that wasn't why the senator had sent the message. "Jake, I thought you should know," Senator Whitehorse said in the video. "The Confederacy has announced they're launching their own humanitarian vessels. 3 ships built using the hybrid technology you pioneered. They're calling them Mercy ships, and they'll be searching for lost Numunu crews in distant sectors." He smiled, his old face warm with emotion. "Other species are watching what you're doing. Some are inspired, others are suspicious. But everyone is paying attention. You're changing the galaxy one rescue at a time. Hope wanted me to tell you she's proud of her Uncle Jake and Aunt Claire. She misses you both, but she understands you're helping children like her who need you." The video showed Hope waving at the camera, her green eyes bright with intelligence and joy. "Come home safe," she said in her child's voice. "I want to hear stories about all the people you saved." Claire watched the message 3 times, tears streaming down her face. She missed her daughter desperately. But seeing Hope healthy and happy made the sacrifice worth it. She was doing this for Hope and for all the children in the galaxy who deserved a chance to grow up. As the first year of their mission approached its end, the Promise of Hope had rescued over 400 individuals from 17 different species. They had lost 32 people despite their best efforts, each death a weight that the crew carried. But hundreds lived who would have died, and that made the losses bearable if not easy. Jake stood on the bridge one evening reviewing reports and planning their next rescue. Emma approached carrying 2 cups of coffee. She had grown during this mission, transforming from an eager junior officer into a skilled scientist who could think on her feet under pressure. She sat beside her father in comfortable silence for a moment. "Do you ever wonder if we're making a real difference?" she asked. 400 people saved in a galaxy of trillions. Is it enough? Jake thought about Claire's tears when Hope took her first breath after nearly dying. He thought about Brightwing learning to accept help with dignity. He thought about the Vorath children swimming in their restored environment, alive because Kyle Santos refused to give up. Every one of those 400 people is a universe unto themselves, Jake said. They have thoughts and dreams and people who love them. They matter. We're not going to save everyone in the galaxy, but we'll save who we can, one person at a time. He looked at his daughter with pride. That baby we saved a year ago, Hope. She's growing up in a world where humans and Numunu live together as friends. The children she plays with will grow up thinking cooperation between species is normal. They'll build on what we started and their children will build on what they do. Change doesn't happen all at once, Emma. It happens one choice at a time, one rescue at a time, one person choosing compassion over convenience. Emma nodded slowly, understanding settling over her. So we just keep going. We just keep going, Jake agreed. Luke Waters joined them on the bridge, his warrior's instincts telling him something important was happening. He listened as Jake and Emma discussed the mission's meaning and purpose. When they finished, he added his own perspective. My people have a story, Luke said, about a warrior who found a field of injured animals after a great fire. There were hundreds of them, too many for one person to save. But the warrior began carrying them to water one at a time. Another warrior came along and said, "Why do you bother? You cannot save them all." The first warrior picked up another animal and said, "No, but I can save this one." He smiled, the gesture now familiar and human despite his alien features. You saved me and my people when everyone else said it was impossible or impractical or against the rules. Now we save others. This is the way. The promise of hope continued its journey, responding to distress beacons that had broadcast.